Hello everyone and welcome to On a Serious Note. This is Yimi as usual, and I'm happy today to be bringing you a follow-up to my previous episode where I introduced the concept of strength-based personal development. But hope you're well, hope you're doing great wherever you're listening to my voice right now. As always, I'm excited about this one, so let's get right into it. So I thought today we could start with how I discovered some of my strengths, what some of those strengths are, how I apply them to my daily life, be it work or my hobbies or my side activities, whatever the case may be, and just generally the things that set me on the path to being an advocate for strength-based personal development. So when I was growing up, I had a lot of interest. I was interested in sports, and I did participate in sports as well. I used to write rap. I thought I was going to be a rapper, but at some point I also thought I was going to be a music producer. And academically, I liked math, I was into computers, I liked a little bit of physics, but I ended up studying statistics in the university. And even within statistics, I had quite a few different interests. I was interested in medical statistics at some point, but I really liked probability, which made me interested in actuarial science that would have eventually made me end up in the insurance industry. But when I started my career, I started it in digital marketing. And in my first job, one of the things that gave me the advantage towards getting that job was me sending a letter to the company email where I had to describe pretty much what I bring to the table. In other words, describe some of my strengths. And I didn't have any work experience then. I was maybe pretty active in school and there were some things that I could mention, but I also needed to talk about my strengths. And what I did then was I went pretty much to the basic knowledge that I had of myself as a kid. So I talked a little bit, I summarized, or I talked a little bit about what I had heard about myself from my mom as a toddler and some of the things that I've heard from my friends and how they described me as a person. And I pretty much just, used that as my, love letter to the company about why I'm a good fit for the job. And that got me an interview. That was all good and amazing, but the reality was, the more I needed to kind of move up in my career and move to other jobs, because like I said, I had different interests and I did work in different diverse industries from there on, I had to keep on selling myself and I had to keep being aware of what I'm good at and how I need to kind of portray that to potential employers, but also, in networking and meeting people, showing a little bit of value. And this got a little bit more difficult the more I went into my career, and I could make a whole other podcast episode about the reasons why, but the summary would be, I got faced with a lot more challenges that challenged my own knowledge of myself and my strengths, and I had to assess my performance on the job and all these kind of things. So it got a little bit more difficult for me to describe my strengths, and I needed to become a little bit more self-aware about, what am I really good at, especially now that I've been able to apply myself on a real life job. Now, parallel to this, I'm interested in people. I'm a people-focused person. I like to learn about people. I like to learn about their stories, where they're coming from, what challenges they faced, just generally what makes them tick, what makes them who they are. And one of the things that I would do then, I used to take a lot of personality tests. I used to make my friends take personality tests. And, it was just one of those very interesting things. And one of all the tests that I took that was very, very interesting to me was on 16personalities.com. You can check it out. And there, the personality test is based on the MBTI, which is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, if I'm not wrong, where you pretty much have a combination of certain letters, predominantly 4 letters with an extra 1. So you're either introverted or extroverted, which is an I or an E. You're either intuitive or observant, which is an N or an S. You're either thinking or feeling, which is a T or an F, or prospecting or judging, which is a P versus a J. And I ended up being an ESFP, another story entirely. And in that particular report, it talks a little bit about like what your personality type is like, what popular figures have that personality, what are some strengths, some weaknesses, what are your natural tendencies in the workplace, in friendships, in relationships, and all this kind of stuff, right? So what that helped with a little bit was to put into some words, some things that I could relate to, things that I could see myself in. And, it had that in some very nice words that I could also re-communicate to people as things that I'm good at or as ways to describe myself to people. But even with this, the need to continually understand my strengths and put them in, words that I can pass across to other people, of course, continue to grow strong. Now, during the pandemic, I stumbled on something else, which is the Clifton's 34 Strengths or Clifton Strength Finder, which was made by Gallup, a company. And their theory is that everybody has this 34 strengths, but just in different combinations. So I could have the same, for instance, top 10 strengths as another person, but arranged in a different way. But then when you do take the full test, which is paid, by the way, can't remember how much, maybe it was $50 or 50 euros or something like that. And I, paid to do it because I was really curious in the pandemic, what I could get from that. And yeah, it ranks you pretty much your number 1, 2, 3, all the way to 34, but with a focus on the top 5. Well, focus on the top 5 first, and then from there to the top 10, and really, really focusing on those as what would give you your best chance for success. They also emphasized kind of the what I mentioned in the previous episode about weaknesses, and weaknesses not necessarily being traits, but certain things or certain tendencies at certain times in certain situations that might hinder your effectiveness or your success. So it doesn't necessarily need to be like this particular trait, but in this situation, this your particular tendency or lack of a tendency could become a hindrance to your success or effectiveness. So I took the test, and what it looks like for each of the ones. So they particularly focus a lot on the top 5, then do an extended to the top 10, and then they pretty much just list out the rest and give a summary statement. It's a very comprehensive report. But they would say how you thrive using this particular strength, why that strength is unique. So they will mention a bunch of like statements that you can potentially relate to. Why you succeed using this particular strength, which is also kind of like a summary statement. I'll give like an example from my report. Then they mention, which is one of the best parts of this report, how to take action to maximize this particular strength. So it's not just for you to say, okay, this is my strength and be able to describe it. It's tips on what you can do to actually use this and exercise this particular strength on a daily basis. And then they also give out a few or a couple of blind spots to watch out for because of this particular strength. So for me, my top 5, okay, I'll give my top 6 because I love my number 6 so much. I kind of wish it was higher on my report, but I'll give you my top 6. So my number 1 is communication. My number 2 is woo, which is winning others over. My number 3 is adaptability. My number 4 is positivity. My number 5 is includer. And my number 6 is activator. Now, I know those are normal English words which you could give your own meanings, but there's a way they describe it in this particular report. So let me give you an example of adaptability because I'm going to kind of give an example from it just right after this. So for adaptability, in describing how I thrive using this strength, it says you prefer to go with the flow. You tend to be a now person who takes things as they come and who discovers the future one day at a time. That's definitely something that I can relate to. Don't like to think too far ahead. You might have noticed that based on the frequency of this podcast. Sorry for that. But I would skip a little bit of the, why it's unique because it's kind of a lot of things, but I'll go to why you succeed using adaptability. And it says, you are flexible and can quickly adjust to changing or unexpected circumstances that upset or intimidate others. Your calm response to chaos reassures others and helps you respond to what people need. Now, there's a bunch of stuff under there on, what I can do to maximize potential. Maybe I would read just one. It says, look for opportunities to respond to people and situations that need your attention. Your natural ability to adapt relieves pressure during stressful situations and calms co-workers and friends. And then I'll mention one blind spot where it says, you're so willing to live in the moment that you might constantly shift your priorities. Be aware that frequent changes can feel endless and often unnecessary to those who thrive on structure and stability. So that's like a blind spot for me to watch out for because of this strength, right? And I could talk very broadly about this. I hear some people say, I really, really want to focus on my weaknesses. I want to really, really cut this stuff out and, be a different person. And that's not to say that those people are wrong or that might not work for them. But from my own point of view, you could be cutting out a strength because of some perceived or because of a blind spot that's attached to that particular strength. But let's discuss that later. The other one I wanted to kind of like read, which is the activator. Another thing that I would kind of bring out in the example, how you thrive, it says you can make things happen by turning thoughts into action. You want to do things now rather than simply talk about them. And why you succeed using this particular strength, you're a catalyst. You naturally know how to turn ideas into action, and you can make things happen. Your energy can be contagious and engaging. There's fewer points because this is my number 6 of how I can take action. But one says record your insights or revelations when you have them so you can act on them later. And one of the blind spots is sometimes you might charge ahead and act without a solid plan. Before making a major decision, think about challenging yourself to consider alternatives and weigh options first. Now, the reason why I read this too is because these are two that I have used a lot in my career, but also in my personal life. So, I mentioned when I actually discovered this Gallup strengths thing in 2020, it was actually a time when I was using some of these strengths. So, we had just entered the pandemic. It was gloom, doom, and whatnot. And I just saw it as an opportunity to be like, you know what, we're not going to the office. I've cut out some of my commute time. What can I do with this time? I just bought a DJ controller. So I was practicing a little bit. I decided, you know what, I could, upload some of this stuff on YouTube. So I opened a YouTube channel, which meant I had to learn how to do video editing and stuff like that. I'd always wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't really know what to talk about. But then I was like, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about all this coaching and self-development stuff. Maybe I can, start to talk about this on a podcast. I bought a microphone like the next day and started podcasting a day after, so it's a combination of like those things, like me being able to do that as a combination of me being adaptable to the changing situations at the time, which were really, really grim. And also just not keeping things in my head and just quickly, once I have the idea, doing them immediately. But you can also see a little bit of the blind spots. I had mentioned the inconsistency with which I actually post on this podcast, because being able to kind of like just turn your thoughts into actions sometimes means you haven't written things down, you haven't thought it through. It's a good idea to start and, gain momentum. There's a momentum to taking small steps, and, that's a big strength to be able to take those small steps. But sometimes I need to like rein it in and really plan ahead and be like, okay, what do I want to do with this? How do I want to bring it all together? And that's something that I need to practice a little bit more and do a little bit more of. So yeah, I think what I really wanted to bring out of this is, aside all this personality test or all this strength finder test that I did to realize what my strengths were, of course, there were some things that I was aware of based on, talking to people, managers' feedback over the years, my friends telling me about myself. Sometimes some of these things that I actually show are things that are perceived, differently by other people, and I might think of them negatively. But all of those things come together for me to kind of be aware of my strengths. But I think, discovering what your strengths are very, very important, because once you become aware and you can kind of put those down, one, you can communicate it to other people, but two, you can also learn how to take action to exercise those strengths and keep using them in times when you actually do have certain hindrances, to try and use some of those strengths, maybe not in a conventional way, to actually create a path for success for yourself. And yeah, the third thing, which I kind of subtly want to put out there, is, sometimes you're really, really focused on your weaknesses and you want to cut them out. But those things that you perceive as weaknesses are just maybe blind spots due to strengths. So you need to be careful not to cut out a strength completely or to suppress one of your strengths just because there's a blind spot attached to it. There's a lot more to discuss on this topic, but I hope that we can, really, really get into it. I want to bring a few guests on for us to really dissect and talk, from different perspectives. Let me know what you think about, everything that I've said. I have learned now that on Spotify and I think on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, you can actually leave comments. So please leave comments. Let me know if you want to hear more about like my strengths. Just let me know what what you think and how you think we can also have conversations around these that might be insightful for you. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you've picked something up, and if not, I hope my voice has been soothing. I hope to see you again very soon on the next episode, which I hope is going to drop very soon. Take care of yourselves. Take care. Love everyone around you. Spread positive vibes to everyone that you see. One of my strengths is positivity. So, have that enthusiasm, have that good cheer, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.